Good morning and/or afternoon, everybody. Hope you're doing well. Welcome back to the Heel Turn channel. An auspicious start to an auspicious week. We have somebody who I'm proud to call a friend. I feel very incredibly honored, really, to be put in the position to announce this launch. Some of you may be familiar with him. He's pretty active on Twitter. Well, he's got a fan account now who helps support get the message out. But a good guy, one of the smartest guys we've got, one of the guys really pushing forward some original thought. So with no further ado, it is my high privilege and great pleasure to introduce SoCo. Welcome to SoCo in the Morning, SoCo.
Hello, thank you for having me. Yeah, I'm really happy to be here. Really honored and humbled by that introduction. Yeah, this is going to be kind of a new thing I'm trying out here. So there's going to be a little bit of a learning curve, but it should be good. So really, let's jump right into it. The news, the biggest story of the day seems to be the Jussie Smollett case. And now, I wasn't really a big fan of the story from the get-go, just because, the hate crime hoaxes are getting boring at this point. I mean, they were boring from the beginning, but it's just, you see another one come across the table, and then it's just like more of the same. But this one stuff actually seems to be happening. It looks like they're actually going to be bringing him up on a jury trial here against a grand jury for filing a false police report. And so that seems to be a relatively new development in regards to this sort of thing. It usually seems like they just kind of get away with it. Sometimes they'll get away with a big GoFundMe jackpot, and then uh, just they just get away with it with no problem. Um, but yeah, Joaquin, do you have any thoughts about that?
Well, I mean, first off, I find it kind of interesting that this is such a, it did really seem to be the highest profile of the hate hoaxes, right? We've had a few fake crimes,
Hmm.
but like they all seemed kind of silly compared to the play that this one got. I just remember going into it and like seeing all these big name people talking about it and like thinking this is pretty obviously a hoax, and when it comes out, it's going to burn them, and I wonder how they're going to react.
Exactly, and they're just entirely covering it up, ignoring it, or deleting tweets, stuff like that. Like we had, let me see here. We had Cory Booker, Kamala Harris, Maxine Waters, Nancy Pelosi, AOC, all tweeting out in support of Jussie Smollett here. Um, and I mean, now Nancy Pelosi did delete her tweet, but like Cory Booker's tweet is still up, which is kind of surprising to me, to be honest, that
Well,
some of
Corey
them are
likes
still doing stuff.
fantasy. Corey's the same guy. You remember the story of T-Bone, right?
No, refresh my memory on that.
Oh, okay. This is fun. So Cory Booker, presidential candidate. This is not a joke. This is not made up. This is pretty well sourced. Back when he was running for mayor of Newark, would often talk about a friend of his who was in a gang and who the interaction with, it kept him real. It exposed him to that real urban life. And this gangbanger who he was like best friends with was named T-Bone, according to Corey. The problem is that journalists actually dug into it back when journalists still did, journalism, and they
Mm.
found out that T-Bone was entirely fictitious. Guy didn't exist. Cory Booker has an imaginary friend, and he
Oh,
talks
so
about
he's just a fan of stories of made up people then. Okay, I guess that sort of makes sense, but I mean, I guess if you've done that once, then it becomes easier to do it repeatedly. Just sticking by lies like that. But one of the really funny things that came up was there was a black civil rights activist that said that Jussie Smollett could have started a race war. Um, and it was actually a black civil rights activist, which seems to be some of the first pushback I've seen from the left with any like significance beyond like just kind of paying lip service. It was a black civil rights activist Najee Ali is calling for the prosecution and arrest of Jussie Smollett for lying about being the victim of a hate crime, saying that he could have unintentionally triggered a race war. Um,
that's really funny. that is wild. But I
it's
mean, look, the blacks, they aren't going to stand by. The blacks don't like the gay stuff, right? Like, remember what happened with Proposition 8 in California? It was the black vote that turned out that led to, Proposition 8 for gay marriage being defeated by a pretty narrow margin, but defeated nonetheless. Blacks are not big fans of the gay stuff.
No, not at all, not at all. So, I mean, he's not finding himself his only allies are on like the kind of white liberal left. I mean, it does seem like a lot of the blacks tend to be more socially conservative, but they're concerned about self-interest. So, Democrat is the way that they vote. Um, so I mean, but so when it comes to stuff like this, he's not going to get the kind of support from the black community that he's necessarily going to get from like the LGBT alphabet community and just the rest of the like mainstream left. Um, and now it's interesting how mad the cops are about this. Like they seem to be like I guess it's not shouldn't be that surprising, but it's surprising to see them actually start to take action about this. Like obviously, it's police resources, time, money being wasted, uh, and so I can't help but wonder if they're kind of itching just for the chance to do something like this, and this is just they're kind of striking when the iron is hot because I mean, for such a high profile case, it was a really unbelievable story. Like nobody believed it at all. Um, I don't even think the people really defending Jussie believed it. I mean, Joaquin, do you think that there was anyone who actually believed that story?
Well, I mean, from the get-go, I think the only people that were credulous about it were those that just wanted to use it as a political cudgel against white people, and they kind of figured it'll never come out, right? This will never be exposed. If there was some falsity to it, it's not going to be put out there. Um, I don't know. It's hard to say because, like, I can see the cops not wanting to be, dicked around by this guy, but it's also
Mhm.
Chicago where so many of the cops are black that they'd probably have an interest in pushing something like this.
Well, I mean, the fact that there were allegedly his black friends that he hired to do this attack, and I think they worked with him on the show, if I'm not mistaken. And there's the whole gay thing, so that might those two things might play into it. Um, the I wonder how blacks feel about other blacks faking or hate crimes like that. Like, there's got to be a good percentage of them that actually get frustrated by that.
Yeah, well, not to go full Thomas Friedman, and this is not like okay. So I say that
No,
because
not to get.
Friedman is known for talking to like cab drivers or allegedly doing that, and then in his books, oh, my source was this conversation I had with a cab driver. But I was going out last night to get vape juice because I'm a complete degenerate, and the store that I went to is this relatively large black man who works there, nice guy. And I get it, and for whatever reason, we were just kind of shooting the shit about the Smollett case. And he was like, I would have just taken that ass whoop and walked home. Like, I don't know why he's got to make a big deal out of it. People get their ass whooped all the time. I mean, I don't think people took it too seriously, but I don't think the black community really wants to stand with a guy who is so obviously, like if when you talk about people that are race haters, people that are very obsessed with the race stuff, it's more the black community than the white community, right? They have to live with race. They have to deal with the reality of it, and they'll be the first ones to admit that there's a lot of goofy niggas out in these streets, right?
Definitely, yeah. I mean, most of the like kind of conversations where I felt racially aware that I can think of growing up were usually around black people who were pointing out my race or something like that. So they definitely have like kind of a stronger consciousness about that. And so, yeah, when something like this happens, it just kind of cuts right at that really personal thing. Because I mean, it's like a race is kind of a personal thing for all of us, really. I mean, even I remember a while ago there was a survey where they asked college students what they identified with strongest, and across all demographics, they said their own race. So like white people were much lower. I think they were only like a third of them said they identified most strongly with being white, um, but that was still like the highest percentage chunk out of the survey. So I mean, yeah, it probably does kind of, I guess, all that coming back around to say, um, it's probably easier for them to kind of deal with that problem internally, just because they have that racial consciousness.
What do you
But
make of the push from like the Charlie Kirk wing of the right to to try to viciously virtue signal on this and to make it all about how the Democrats are the real racists?
I mean, it's kind of played out, right? Part of me wants to say that it could have a positive effect. Like, just pointing out hypocrisy and all that. But I mean, we've been doing that for decades and decades, and they just keep losing. That side of the aisle just keeps losing and losing on the few things they care about. They compromise on a bunch of stuff, and then they lose on the stuff they care about. So I mean, it's hard to have too much respect for that. I don't know. What do you think about that?
Well, I don't like the power that we give them. First of all, I'm really disheartened to see that it seems to be that the idea of like anti-white identitarianism is what the right is striving for. But just to see that that's what's ascended. Like if you look at the lineup for CPAC this year, God, I almost said APAC, but basically interchangeable, right? It's like Diamond and Silk and Kirk, Candace Owens, that whole wing, right? They're like the Jason Kesslers of the GOP.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, I think I don't, this might be a little bit of a conspiratorial term, but it's kind of where the term Zog comes from. Of it's really both sides of the aisle are playing against us. And I mean, before I came to this movement, that was why I kind of was really nihilistic towards politics, because I didn't feel like there was anyone actually fighting in my favor, and I didn't have like the ability to articulate the racial side of it or anything like that. But it really didn't seem like anyone was fighting in our favor, even with all that kind of anti-white identitarianism counter signaling. It didn't get through to me at all. It didn't click, and I don't think it clicks with most people.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I think that there's this big issue with, I guess you could call it an enthusiasm gap, right? Right, like people in our generation just either they don't care about politics or they're incredibly radicalized. There's not a whole lot that are trying to do the whole like mainstream acceptability thing. Because I don't think people, like, I mean, I'm assuming that we're probably ballpark the same age, right? And we grew up with, the Iraq War kind of being this huge thing that was hanging over us, and it was hard not to be at least somewhat politically aware of what was going on. But now people are like either willfully disconnected or in, one of several entrenched camps, and don't you dare cross that line. We treat the progressive wing of the Democrat Party like they're moderates, but they're as extremist as, they allege us to be.
Yeah, it seems like the only ones that actually go into mainstream politics like that are borderline grifters. They're trying to make a career for themselves and wield power, as opposed to um, maybe I'm as opposed to, I want to say, actually believing in the system. Um, but I can't really speak to that on their beliefs too much. But it really, from their actions, I can't really say that they actually care about the outcomes of our nation. It really does just seem like the radical types at this point that are really politically motivated on a sincere level.
What do you make of the way that social media has influenced the way that people interact with politics? I mean, I think this news story is a good example of kind of the new media and the interplay there with actual news story. But what do you make of the link between, the way that people are kind of engaging with politics through Twitter now as opposed to through the newspaper or through real politics?
Well, I mean, I think it was huge, because think about it. Before, like, we had the internet or any sort of like rapid instant communication, any sort of communication that reached farther than like a local level really had to make it through some gatekeepers. So like you had to get on the cable news channels, and they've got their own set of gatekeepers. Getting into the newspaper, getting on radio. So all the messaging went through the filters of people who had managed to work themselves into that kind of position of power. Um, but then the internet came around, and it just kind of removed that entirely. And, I think that really scared them. I mean, the stuff that the kind of crackdown they've had over the past 2 years is absolutely unprecedented. Like, I honestly didn't think we would see the degree of just censorship and crackdown that we really did end up seeing over the past couple years. Um, so yeah, like, I don't know. I think it's really beneficial for us, but we're heading in a direction where they're kind of starting to get that gatekeeper position back. Um, we're in danger of losing that free communication.
Do you
Um,
think that the censorship on social media has, in a concrete way, changed the direction of the conversation?
Absolutely. I think even worse, what's worse than the censorship on social media was the like network busting. Because I know there's like a lot of us back in 2017 around the time of Charlottesville, we were in like DM Twitter groups, and nobody had ever seized a URL like that before, and Discord servers hadn't been shut down. Twitter accounts like didn't get. I mean, they got banned, but it wasn't at the same scale. Um, but eh, then they started cracking down, and I'm sorry, I got distracted there. Can you jog what I said? What your question there again?
Oh, you're fine. Well, I was just talking about if the censorship has really changed where we're going. You see
Yeah,
people like if you're too open about talking about certain ethnic groups, the Jewish people especially on Twitter. But like even like saying learn to code, you see people get banned and banned and banned again. I always feel bad when I see somebody on my timeline retweeting, oh, hey, I got banned. Can you help me find my friends again? And I think that that's always a good thing to retweet and share just to help people out. But I mean, I get kind of concerned that like it's actually having an effect on, our ability to engage.
it really is. It limits our reach and it limits our coordination. Because I know that during some of these like bans that went on, we lost contact with people that we never heard from again. Um, so I mean, it's even more sinister than just not getting a message out there. It's that it actually silences people virtually for good. It takes them out of the game entirely once they're done wrestling with Twitter or whatever entity they're dealing with. Um, so I mean, it's it's something that we've managed to start to push back against pretty well, though. I mean, we've like using third party platforms um, to be able to jump in and say, "Hey, I'm okay." If you get banned on Twitter or something like that, I think that is a really big thing in terms of resisting censorship. Is just resisting the censorship of communication, like intercommunication. Um, so yeah, it's a really it's a really concerning topic, but I think we're making some good progress in that area, and I think that people are relatively on the same page in terms of where we need to go in order to get around that. It's just a matter of like this stuff takes time. It's a matter of everyone's projects to progress and actually reach a point where they're functional. Because I know there's a lot of people with lots of really good stuff in the works, directly intended to address this.
Yeah, and I certainly want to get to that in a little bit. I think that's really good stuff to talk about. We've certainly made a conscious effort here to try to encourage activism and give people avenues where they can support, even if they can't really do more than just throw a few shekels in a good direction. Speaking of throwing shekels, by the way, I don't know if the description's been updated or not, but streamlabs.com/heelturn1 as always. And if you want to support the project in a bigger way, newproject2.com/heelturn. Very cool stuff, and we always appreciate it. Also, oh wait, no, I think that the ALDF fundraiser is over, but thank you everybody who did support that. It was an incredible success, and I know those guys are really appreciative of everything that happened there. Just huge stuff. But I wanted to kind of bring this around a little bit. I saw Jason Kessler. I think you were watching this too. I saw
Mhm.
Jason Kessler on Southern Dingo's show last night, which I found to be very interesting because the Ambient Falcon is always one of those weird cases, right? And I'm in this weird position because I was actually thinking about trying to help Jason, try to help him, get out there, rehabilitate himself a bit in the public eye. But then obviously he went in this insane direction, attacking, basically everybody in the worst possible way, and even the people that were platforming him in order to attack people they didn't like, were saying this guy's just an absolute loon. But I found it very interesting when he was talking about kind of the angle that we need to go in as a movement last night. When he was saying, oh, we need to engage more with the activism. We need to, reframe it more in the view of civil rights. And I'm like, I don't disagree with that. I don't think Richard necessarily would disagree with that. But the way that you're doing it by tearing people down and by saying we've just got to deny the realities of history, we've got to throw anybody who's edgy over the bus, it's over the side of the ship. It's like that's not the way you do anything, not let alone politics.
Yeah, I mean, the impression I got was even a little bit worse than that, in that it sounded like he was just repeating basic shitlib talking points. Well, well, considering whites to be a valid class to discuss. He didn't even like listening to what he was saying. He didn't sound right wing to me. He sounded like an outright liberal, um, which, given like his activism history and stuff like that, that's definitely understandable why he would sound like that. But it sounds like sincere. It's not like he's just trying to make his viewpoints palatable. It's that he's actually a neoliberal, in my estimation. I don't know. Do you think that's an unfair assessment?
I mean, it's like some sort of weird mix of Nick Fuentes, Baked Alaska, and Christian Piccolini. The idea that you can seek redemption for having previously been associated with those evil Wignat types, and to say, oh well, I didn't realize that the people that were sincere white identitarians, might say edgy things, might support, optics that I find to be personally distasteful, that kind of crap. And then at the same time to seek redemption by attacking all of those people. It really does seem like the worst of all worlds. And one of the things that I found very interesting about last night's show was not that he was saying this kind of stuff, but that he was saying it to the audience that he was, right? When he was attacking the people, the sincere identitarians, and calling them Nazis and saying we have no room for Nazis. It's like he's not aiming at the audience of the show he was on. He's trying to aim for the more mainstream audience to turn them away from the alt right. I think very similar to what Andrew Anglin said in a recent piece on Daily Stormer regarding Owen Benjamin, basically saying don't be part of the alt right, which I find to be very interesting because there's not really an alternative being put out there. And the people that are sincere, that are true believers, that are all about the thing, they seem to be the biggest victims of all. And perhaps it's because they're the easiest to victimize because they are kind of out there on the edge without a whole lot of support.
Yeah, it seemed to me like Kessler was trying to get a clip that he could show a different audience. Because if you didn't know who Kessler was before last night, I mean, to someone who's like kind of just in the mainstream, very normie type, he sounded very reasonable. Uh, you wouldn't know that he's a snake just from that clip. Uh, I think that people would be surprised by their reaction of the chat if they're just looking at that with no backstory. So, I mean, I don't know who he's trying to bring that back to and show it to, though. Like, what audience is going to, like, I even like a lot of like normie conservative Republicans would kind of dismiss him for being shit libby. I mean, hey, he got kicked out of the Proud Boys for being too far left, from what I heard anyway. So, I mean, I don't know who he's trying to reach. Like, is this a real audience?
I mean, I feel like, and it's not just Kessler, right? And it's not just like the irony sphere of like Baked and his fellow grifters, and it's not just you've also got the Charlie Kirk side of the GOP. This idea that, because let's be honest here, there is no youth engagement in the right wing except for us, really. The young people that are conservative tend to go in our direction, or at least something equally, whether it's NRX or ANCAP, or they're on the other side. But that seems to be where the youth engagement is, and I don't know. I feel like it's a fake thing when they're like, we can be edgy but not be the edge. We can be right wing, but disavow fellow right wingers. That we can seek that approval, and it really does kind of remind me of the conservatives, in the movement more broadly, where it's just the Republican senators and congressmen who are like, oh, we can dog whistle, but we'll make sure to vote for that anti-BDS bill. We'll make sure to censor Steve King.
Yeah, I mean, it it really just seems like to me he's just trying to desperately recover himself to a point where he can enter the mainstream again, and I just don't see that happening at all.
I mean, don't you though? Do you think any of these people have any hope of approaching, mainstream respectability on the right wing?
I don't know. I mean, they it really depends on who you're talking about. I think some of them did at one point. I think Nick Fuentes had a chance of breaking into the mainstream. Um, I think that Alsop could possibly. That's about the only name I can think of that would have a chance of breaking into the mainstream. Um, but I don't know, like the mainstream, they've heard our talking points before. Like we aren't the first people to think let's push pro-white politics um, in Washington. Um, these people have been around for a long time, heard these talking points years ago. So I don't think that we're going to be able to fly under the radar. It's going to have to be that the Overton window moves um, to the point where they fit into it. I guess I don't think that anyone on our side has the chance of moving themselves within the Overton window. I think that we have to have the Overton window kind of include our people, expand.
Yeah, I would also say that I think that one of the more interesting trends right now is this, the pushback on the anti-Semitism thing, right? Because finally, some brown woman in a hijab said that anti-Semitism is okay, right? They questioned APAC, but this discussion of the weaponization of the use of anti-Semitism, they haven't been concerned about it until now, right? They're happy to say, oh, well, you're all anti-Semites, we can cut you out of the political discussion. You're politically unpersoned, but now they kind of have to engage with the fact that there has been a bit of an overreach, and these people are not going to defend us, right? Ilhan Omar is not going to say, oh, it's right for these wignats on Twitter to be critical of Jewish power, right? They'll cuck on their end, they'll do just enough so that they can get acceptability and still push their BDS stuff. But left wing anti-Zionists really never seem to be there to defend or support the right wing anti-Zionists or people that are critical of Jewish power.
No, they've got a united front in that regard. They know who their enemies are, and they maintain a united front against us, and so they know not to give us an inch because we will take a mile. And we've been giving them inches, and they've been taking miles as well. So, I mean, I think that's something we could learn from, definitely. But yeah, I just don't see the mainstream being a very viable option for pushing our political goals beyond using it as a platform to get our message out there whenever is prudent. But I kind of wanted to bring that around. Uh, I was looking when I was doing show prep, I came across this article that said FBI plotting to keep DNA of entire population on file to create nation of suspects.
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah. So it turns out that back in 2017, Donald Trump signed the Rapid DNA Act. And that means that police are allowed to take DNA samples, um, even if you're not convicted of a crime, if you just got arrested. Uh, and it's going to also require the police to share that database that they get with the FBI. So they've got these mobile machines that are designed to run a DNA test right then and there. Um, like I've got this Daily Star article right here. Let me like he gives this example. Um, it's the John W. Whitehead from the Rutherford Institute and believes it's a sinister development which will make everyone a suspect. Um, Speaking of the Daily Star, he said, "The fact of the matter is that these machines are not foolproof, but we could look at a situation in which someone could be arrested, have their mouth swabbed, and then be charged within hours after generating a DNA profile. We're looking at the erosion of the concept of innocent before proven guilty because it will allow police to go on fishing expeditions. When you sit on a park bench, you shed DNA. That is now up for grabs by police who could swab it and run it through a DNA database. If they find a match or if misconduct occurred anywhere in the vicinity where DNA was found, you might find yourself charged with a crime you never committed merely because you happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time." Now, I didn't hear anything about this Rapid DNA Act at all. Joaquin, did you?
I can't say that I did. No.
No, this is like this really flew under the radar, and I think this is something we should kind of start focusing on more in regards to Trump, is just how he's expanding the police state. Um, because I mean, that might be an even bigger thing than the race against the demographic clock, is the race against the police state. Um, and the social media censorship is kind of like the counterpart to that. This is like the law enforcement counterpart. Would you agree?
Well, maybe. It's funny, right? I think the libertarians, and especially the post-libertarians, see this and they're like, "Oh God, this is so horrifying. They're taking our precious vital fluids and they're going to use them against us." And look, I get like it's creepy, and it's Orwellian. But if you look at the fact that crime is disproportionately committed by a certain group of people in this country, and it's really hard to get them to testify, right? Because they have the in-group loyalty beyond even the loyalty to the state, right? Somebody gets shot in certain neighborhoods in Southside Chicago, for example. No one's going to say a damn thing to the cops, even if they got shot. So I could kind of see the frustration of the people that are in charge of trying to keep this country safe, and they're like, we're just going to have a database of all these criminals, and we're gonna use that to track it, right? Because if you do that, it's going to be an inherently um, biased system in a certain demographic way, and that's not necessarily a bad thing if your goal is to actually prevent crime.
Well, and that's all well and good um, if they're actually going to pursue the crimes and use it in that intended way. Strictly from a law enforcement standpoint, I can see where you're coming from, like where law enforcement would be coming from in regards to that, especially like the average cop on the beat. But I mean, after seeing Charlottesville, it's hard to be okay with anything like this. I mean, they are definitely not on our side, and we've seen them do horrific things. And so I don't know why we would expect them to use this any more responsibly than they have the other powers that they've been given.
No, I mean, look, that's a fair point. I just, it's a trade-off, right? Of we live in a society where, a small minority of the population. I'm sorry, somebody's doing work on the other side of this wall. But a small portion of the population does this disproportionate. Like, okay, let's say that you created another kind of. I'm sorry, I know that sounds terrible. It's just,
No worries.
but let's say hypothetically, right? You passed a law, and this has been historically in this country. It's happened in various states. You have a state law where certain felons, committers of violent felonies, are chemically castrated or whatever. That would have a demographic impact just because of the nature of crime statistics. So, there's a bit of a trade-off. But I agree with you that the Orwellian police state, given the way that we know that they target us as political dissidents, is a huge problem. And I'm just going to mute. You go for a while they drill holes in this wall.
Sounds good. Yeah, I mean, this is where I can kind of really appreciate some of the libertarian perspectives, because it like I can really see how in a very fascistic kind of government that is really operating in like in the best interest of its citizens and all that, I could see how that would be beneficial. But like even the chemical castration thing makes me a little bit concerned because, like, you never know if they're going to be expanding that to thought crimes. And now I know that's kind of getting to the slippery slope argument, but I mean, if there's one thing I've learned over the past like 10 years, it's that the slippery slope is real. Um, I remember back in the day, like just being a kid and and arguing about these things and hearing people say like these slippery slope arguments, and I just thought it was a fallacy. And I remember saying like, if any of that comes true, then I'm gonna go hard to the right because that is concerning. And guess what happened? All of it started coming true. And guess where I am? Um, I lean to the right, you could say, moderate Republican, but still on the right. Whereas previously, probably been like a left leaning libertarian, mostly out of apathy as a kid. Um, but yeah, so they've even had instances already where they have convicted, they've caught people and convicted someone on this. Um, I've got this article on Twin Cities. They had this guy in Minnesota. Um, he ordered food at a concession stand, wiped his mouth with a napkin, and dropped it in the trash. And then these prosecutors, investigators, recovered the napkin that he had, and then it linked him with a 1993 stabbing of a woman in Minneapolis. And they cross-referenced his DNA that they got there with those genealogical sites. So the police, the FBI, the law enforcement has access to 23andMe, Ancestry, those DNA databases. And I mean, even going back to that Daily Star article here, that guy, John Whitehead from the Rutherford Institute, he alleges that hospitals are taking and storing newborn babies' DNA without the parents' consent. And now I don't even know how that's even legal. I mean, maybe if I could have looked into this a little more to see if reading the text of the
Well, even if
bill.
there's a legal justification for it, this is what jumps out at me, as somebody who likes to screw up constitutional law on air, which apparently I did the other night. And I do apologize for those. I'll clear it up next week on Kingdom of Fear, but I did get a point wrong on that. But the Fourth Amendment is pretty much plain text, right? Like it's not complicated. It was written a while ago, but it was plain text. It says the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrants shall issue but upon probable cause, supported by an oath of affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and persons or things to be seized. That's really straightforward in the basis of a lot of the process that we have. But okay, right there in it, the right of the people to be secure in their persons, I would think would apply to, your DNA, your literal person, your biological signature. So the idea that they can just, go around and start fishing through trash cans and digging up people's DNA and stuff, that seems to be a pretty much on the face violation of a basic thing. But these courts exist to explain why that's not right. Why these people who have these law degrees and I sucked all the right dicks in the country club. They get to tell us what the law is, despite the fact that anybody with a middle school education could read that paragraph and understand pretty much what the intention was.
Absolutely, absolutely. And yeah, it's what I'm wondering is, is there any resistance whatsoever in the country against this? I mean, is anyone talking about it? Are there any Supreme Court cases trying to make it through the courts? I mean, I just kind of stumbled across this morning. It was a one-off link on the bottom of Drudge. So I mean, I need to do
There
more
have been a
research
few
on this.
challenges on particularly on the use of DNA and the widespread collection of it. There have been because I mean that kind of stuff actually is pretty common to get challenged in the courts, right? Because somebody's going to get charged off of that, and then their defense attorney is going to try to find this novel theory on appeal to get them out.
Mm.
Uh, and there have been cases where like various collections of DNA have been, thrown out as evidence because the courts found, the law or the method of the collection to be not constitutional. But more often than not, 95% of 95% of criminal charges are resolved by a plea agreement. So it doesn't actually matter until somebody manages to fight it all the way up, and even then, you're lucky if the Supreme Court will take it. That's the nature of these things, right? It's very quick for the Congress or for the legislatures to pass a law, and a lot longer for anything to change, unless, of course, it's the president trying to build a wall, in which case the courts will just absolutely fuck him immediately.
Yeah, I wonder if like there's got to be people like because there's got to be people out there who are mounting like some sort of resistance to it beyond just like there's got to be people looking for a court case or something like that. I wonder if there's any opportunity for cooperation there, maybe between us and some of the edgier anti-cop libertarians or something like that, because this is a really important conversation because they could conceivably just increase the power of the police state to the point where even if demographics are in our favor, we're never able to get what we want done because they're able just to control uh, every aspect of people's lives. I mean, even down to, and I mean, this is kind of why I drew the parallels to the social media censorship, because like social media censorship is kind of like a mental version of that. Would you agree?
Yeah, it's thought crime, right? They haven't criminalized it in America yet, but there was a gal in Britain who just got arrested for denying the Holocaust because of a YouTube video.
Exactly. Yeah, and I think she actually got convicted and sent to prison for that. And I mean, we just saw those guys. I'm trying to remember the guy Hyperborean Art on Instagram. He got convicted because he was affiliated with National Action. Uh, and I remember they were saying because he got arrested this past fall, and if I'm not mistaken, the National Action was banned about 2 years prior, and they claimed that he was in contact with National Action uh, for a year after they were banned. But by the time they were bringing the charges against him, he hadn't even been in contact with them for a year. So I mean, I mean, it's almost retroactive hate crimes at that point. Um, I mean, arguably it was after that law was in place, but I mean, what's the point of convicting someone of that like so far after the fact?
Well, and in America, we don't have due process, right? Some Antifa group goes out, they find that you listen to an edgy podcast or you said something edgy on Twitter, and they will dig through it. God forbid if you're a public figure. I mean, there was that football player who, like, I think he was going to get drafted, and they dug through and they found some, like, he had said faggot on Twitter or something. And it was a huge deal. And it really hurt him. But this is used against everybody because that's kind of like the happy-go-lucky mainstream version of it. But for us, think of how many guys who have gotten doxxed and lost their jobs, lost their livelihoods, gotten in all sorts of trouble just because they had political views that are outside of the mainstream. There was never any due process. There was never any trial before a jury of their peers. It was just a private actor revealed their personal information, and then they got screwed over because the private. We have thought crime. We've just privatized the enforcement.
And this is a little bit of a shifted subject here, but like what drives me up the wall is that is illegal. That is a harassment. I mean, I'm sure there's dozens of different charges that one could come up with to charge someone with a crime like that. I mean, if we managed to, if someone on our side managed to do something like that to someone on the left, could you imagine like what kind of criminal charges will be brought against them if they they were able to track that person down. I mean, I don't know. I just can't imagine that they wouldn't um, bring down the hammer in whatever way they could. And Trump doesn't do anything about it. He doesn't do anything about it at all. Even when like his supporters are attacked at his events. I mean, it really seems like he doesn't show his supporters the support that we have showed him in the past. And I think that more than anything else is kind of one thing that bothers me about Trump, because it's kind of a betrayal, I guess. And I remember seeing a long time ago someone saying that getting betrayed by your first populist politician is like losing your virginity. Um, so I mean, maybe this is just kind of like a natural process that we're going through, of learning that the populist politicians will always get corrupted by the system. Um, I don't know. What do you think about that?
I think a lot of the people that came up through the MAGA thing that wanted to be like Trump, right? They saw this guy being successful and they thought emulating that success was the best way to go forward. Only now, instead of emulating the good parts of what made him successful, they're emulating the bad parts, right? Trump is unwilling to even deal with the fact that the Department of Justice, which he allegedly is supposed to be in control of, right, basically openly plotted a coup. Paul Manafort's facing basically a life sentence in prison for like process crimes and tax issues, and Andrew McCabe, who openly plotted a coup against the president. He's out on a book tour. This is kind of the contradiction. But you see people who the Charlie Kirk, the Fuentes side of things, that they want to say, oh well, look, we can learn from Trump if we engage with our enemies, if we allow our enemies to kind of define the playing field for us, we can get that mainstream acceptability. Maybe even we can achieve that kind of high level stuff. But they don't see that what they're really doing is they're emulating the bad side of Trump, and that they're letting people who are their existential enemies act like their friends, get inside their OODA loop, and in the end, just not only render them impotent, but destroy them worse than they would be if they had just been opposed as enemies.
Yeah, and it's really frustrating because I think a lot of the people on our side who are doing that, I think a lot of the kind of viewers of those people are sincere. Um, like
Oh,
they
absolutely.
genuinely think that's a valid, viable path forward. And it's kind of like selling false hope. Um, I don't know, like it's just people are constantly getting strung along. Like I don't know. I wonder what what that side of things is going to do if Trump doesn't get reelected, or when a left wing politician comes into power. Because I mean, they're not going to get treated by the establishment any different than us.
Yeah, well, what happens when the QAnon guys finally get blackpilled? What happens when the three percenters are the one? Like, I think it'll be the CivNats that snap first, because they will have been so frustrated having put so much faith in the system. I think people on our side have kind of already, I don't want to say checked out, because certainly we're deeply engaged in politics, but
Hmm.
we've checked out on the viability of mainstream electoral politics. We've checked out on the viability of saying if we play ball with the country club, we might be able to get an accommodation, because we've realized, and I think rightly so, that when they say, oh, you can do all this, but you can't talk about these issues, and those issues typically relate to Israel and Zionist power, because these are the important red lines, that you can't really have a substantial conversation without bringing those up. That if you give those away, you're basically giving away the whole thing, and that, white advocacy on its own is a very weak thing, unfortunately, because whites don't really have as much of a self conception.
Yeah, I mean the playing field that our enemies lay out for us immediately discounts our fundamental assertions. I mean, like the assumptions regarding race, regarding the legitimacy of white advocacy, that sort of thing. Like it's impossible to have a conversation on those terms.
No, absolutely. By the way, we've got a few donations that have rolled in here, so if it's all right with you, I'll just go ahead and read them.
Okay, yeah.
Thank you, people. So, first off, from Jack for two, restore the German Empire. Hail SoCo. Hail Stryker. We appreciate that, Jack. We appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
From Biohazard 777 for 1488. Thank you. Broke, spending money on e-thoughts. Woke, spending money on e-wignats.
Oh, that's good.
That's funny stuff right there. And from Edomite, oh shit, for 20. Hope you're doing well, Edomite. Good to hear from you. Hope you guys are doing well. Keep up the hard work. Very cool, very cool. Good guy, good guy. That's the thing too,
Awesome.
is
Thank
you
you
meet a
guys.
lot of people in this sphere, and thank you all so much for that. You meet so many people in this sphere that it's like, this is what drives me crazy, is they say we don't, you guys don't have the people, you guys don't have the resources, and then you go out there and you find that there's not just an audience, but people that are smart, that are involved, that have been, preparing and bettering themselves because they genuinely believe in stuff, that just aren't necessarily involved because there hasn't been a vehicle yet for them to really do so.
Oh yeah, I mean, I talk to like amazing, talented, intelligent people on a daily basis. I mean, more than I can really keep up with. I'm sure there's a lot of people that I accidentally leave hanging and stuff, but yeah, there's we have tons of unironically the best people on our side. I mean, the ones that really make the jump to our side of politics. I mean, we do have some of the like more fringe people that just kind of comes with this, but besides that, it tends to be people who have really put a lot of thought into these things, and they tend to be very self-driven. Um, so I mean, yeah, if we could just give people some sort of vehicle to operate within, just give people room to succeed, really. Um, and I mean, I think that we've seen a lot of efforts that kind of try to do that. Like we've had the Daily Stormer book clubs, or like the TRS pool parties. I think those were really, really beneficial. I mean, I I think that the importance of meeting up with people locally, it's difficult to overstate. Um, like even just from being alone in your house listening to podcasts and stuff like that, like it feels really alienating, and then making that jump to just talking with someone face to face in real life. Like I'll never forget that first meeting that I had with someone else with the same views. Like just it's so liberating, and I think that more people need to have that on our side. Um, and without the like, because I guess the pool parties and book clubs, I can't really comment on their status, but it seems like the forums and stuff for both of those have kind of locked down, understandably because of very reasonable security concerns. Um, but it's much more difficult to get people on board these days. Um, so I don't know. I think that should be really something we try to focus on, is figuring out how to get around that hurdle.
Yeah, well, see, I think that the issue isn't like tailoring our message to appeal to the mainstream, but simply tailoring the vehicles, right? Like the book clubs and the pool parties were inherently, Jesus Christ, like come on, you don't need to be nailing the wall right behind my head, right? As I'm trying, I'm sorry, guys. Um, but they're like fringy, not necessarily because the people there, but because it's like a resistance structure, right? You're putting in people in a group, you create a cell. It's like secret meetups and highly encrypted and stuff, which is important. We need that kind of network stuff. But the big thing is we need mainstream, not in the sense of message, but in the sense of how we approach things, right? Using the tools of the enemy, political parties, fundraising, actual political action committees, and eventually, real organizations where it won't necessarily require a disclosure of members' identity and stuff, but allow people to engage and make it so that if there are Fed informants, which of course there always are, right? The agent provocateurs, whether from the SPLC or from the FBI, will always be there. But you make it so they can't be doxing everybody, and that if they're going to go out there and try to do something crazy to discredit it, right? Like try to organize some sort of violence, that it would be discredited just by the nature of the group. And I think that that's kind of the point we've got to get to, where we mainstream our play. And I think that's what terrifies them more than anything, why they try to shut us down, is because they realize that there's actually a lot of protections in place, legally speaking, for us to do that. But they would much rather see us as isolated, fringy, trying to seek approval through the mainstream channels, even if it's like Breitbart, right? As opposed to just saying, okay, fine, we'll play our own game. There's that old meme of, well, just go build your own bank, just go make your own stuff. And then when people do that, they're like, oh shit, because that's what it'll come to, right? Trump can't sell out his base forever. They can attack Ann Coulter, they can shoot the messenger all day long, but the reason they hate Ann Coulter isn't because Ann Coulter is wrong or unfairly criticizing them. They hate Ann Coulter because Ann Coulter stayed true to their principles while everybody else kind of followed along in that cult of personality.
Sorry, you got me right when I was taking a sip of my drink. Yeah, definitely. We really need to start abusing the system in the same way they have. And I mean, maybe I may have misspoken a little bit there in saying abusing, but we should be using these political protections that are out there in order to secure our position. They are going to keep on violating those laws, even when we do make that jump to like a legally protected class, whether that's through political campaigning or something like that. So, I mean, I think that's one reason why why I'm sorry, I got distracted there. I think that's one reason. I'm sorry. I lost my train of thought. I got
That's the hardest
completely
part with
distracted.
this sometimes is you'll talk and
I'm
then
sorry.
like
I need to not look at the chat when I'm talking. I'm sorry. This
No,
is a learning curve here. My
it's
apologies.
because like with people, I like interaction with the chat. I wish I could say hi to everyone who's watching and to interact with every comment that's made in there. Somebody with a Moonrune's name made it really. Oh no, it was Trumpty Dumpty in the chat earlier. Said, "Oh God, they broke into my home and shouted, 'This is MAGA country, Wignat.'" Like that's hilarious stuff, But yeah, it's difficult to bring that up. By the way, Chuck Ford tossed 5 to say, "Hey Joaquin, yesterday's Sunday sermon was really great. Thanks, man, for all your dedication to the network and for the cause." Well, I appreciate that. Something I do want to bring up. Matt Parrott made an interesting point on Twitter earlier this morning, and this is something I've talked about personally with him. Is he's very strongly against people like making their living off of the movement. And while I get that, and I certainly think that there's a lot of people out there that are grifters, the amount of time and energy that me and Mr. Jones and other people around here try to spend on this, so we can do what we do, it is full-time job level involvement. And look, I don't think that it's anybody who's a profiteer, especially in this kind of stuff, should be loathed, and rightly so. But we do need a professional activist class, and I feel like the pushback against that, while well-founded, can be kind of destructive in the long term, because we look at our enemies. Journalists do journalism as their full-time job, and yes, it's advocacy often, right? Especially when they're doxing, especially when they're targeting us. DSA organizers often do it as a full-time gig. Many of the people in the ethnic grievance legal industry, that's a full-time job for them. And they found a way to support it. Obviously they get a lot of charitable donations, but often they do support it through sideline businesses, right? A advocacy law firm will often do like criminal defense or something on the side, as well as by the way, Canadian, I don't understand the second name. Spencer's not gone. He took last week off. He should be back tonight with Jim Goat, I believe. Rumors of his demise were much overstated, but yeah, I don't know. What are your thoughts on like professional activism and an advocacy class on our side, SoCo?
Well, I mean, I don't know if you've ever tried to start a project based entirely off of volunteers, but that is a very difficult feat because real work needs to get done in order for our movement to advance. And it's like there's a just pure raw, like a set amount of man hours that's gonna need to get put in order to accomplish all these things that need to get done, like getting the pack set up, getting just different communication, different funding set up, and it's work that is not fun. It's not something that is going to be particularly um, easy for one person to do, or to just get a bunch of people to volunteer and get done. So I mean, I think that like nobody should be making six figures or anything like that, but I think that it's not unreasonable to have people working on the movement full time. I would almost argue that it's necessary, and the blocks to funding that we've experienced have really hindered us in that way.
Yeah, and it shouldn't be. Like you say, and like Nope says in the chat, it shouldn't be fun or glamorous, right? It shouldn't be,
No.
about ego. But yeah, and I feel like, the idea of fundraising, especially when funds just go into people's pockets, right? They say, oh, we're fundraising for the cause, but then they're just really fundraising for themselves or for their own pet project.
Hmm.
But like the ALDF stuff, it's really kind of blown me away that it was, it's like a pop-up fundraiser for a deeply needed cause. And did we raise like the millions of dollars that, leftist cause celebs would get? Of course not. But the money that we raised will be used far more effectively than what leftists would do. The money, a lot of it went just straight to people's commissary to support them. Like that's a concrete good, and they can never take that away from us.
Oh,
And I feel like that's kind of the direction that advocacy needs to go, is find a specific project, find a way to fund it, find people who are going to be in charge and responsible, and then find objective goals. What's a success? What do we categorize as a win here?
yeah, and I think some degree of transparency too would be really helpful. Like if just I don't know to what extent is practical for that, for having transparent books or something like that, but I think just being open about that would help people just be a lot more comfortable. Like if someone's doing fundraising, they're like, "Hey, I'm making 20 grand a year off of this, and then the rest is going to be going to X or something like that, so that I can work 60 hours a week doing it or something like that," then I don't know. I have a hard time saying that's a bad idea. Um, and I think that people will be a lot more comfortable with that, and might even end up raising more money because people know that they can see where all their money is going, basically. Um, so yeah, I don't. It's it's a very sensitive topic
Yeah, right.
because
You're not supposed to talk about money, politics, or religion. And I think we've managed to touch on all but religion. So
no, and it's the problem is compounded because when if you people find out that you're, well, I mean, if the left finds out that you're affiliated with this side of politics, then they'll go and destroy your life. So it's not like people can easily go and volunteer for us. And they were, whoever said that was right about it. It's not supposed to be fun or anything like that. It's dangerous. And I think that is a significant side to it. If something is boring and carries a lot of risk, it's difficult to get people to want to engage with that. Um, so I don't know if we can find ways to mitigate that risk. Um, I think that we would be in a lot better position, and I think that as the funding becomes more available to us, then we'll be able to address that better.
Well, and
But
that's the thing, right? Is even with a relatively small operation, the amount that we could just completely mess with their stuff. Like, okay, let's say Richard announces like full on serious, he's running in 2020.
mhm.
And we started, he would, of course, not fundraise nearly to the level as a lot of the other candidates, but the money that campaign would raise could be used so much more effectively. You see, look at what happened with Jeb Bush in 2016. He raised $250 million and won like 3 delegates. If we had $250 million, we would be about a year away from, a black shirt march on DC.
Oh yeah, and I mean, to the left of us, like grifters are institutionalized. So, I mean, you give to the Red Cross, and the vast majority of that, at one point, I haven't checked lately, was going to like cover administrative costs and stuff like that. So, I mean, yeah, we would absolutely be putting those funds to better use than anyone on the left. But I kind of want to bring that around, um, back to the discussion about getting people to meet up and out of their kind of isolated bubble. Um, the Without like the TRS forums or the Daily Stormer forums just wide open like that. Um, what what do you think are some good ways that people can kind of start heading in that direction or preparing for that?
You mean like networking and organizing?
Yeah, and like getting out of their in real life bubble of just listening to podcasts and then never talking to anyone face to face with those beliefs. And
Well,
and I just want to give the disclaimer
yeah.
really quick. It's understandable if someone's got like a career that doesn't allow for them to do that or whatever. This is in regards to people who, because I know for a fact there's people out there sitting there listening to the show who just really wish they had people to meet up with and talk to face. So I just want to give that disclaimer really quick so people aren't like you're trying to get people with careers doxxed or something like that.
Right. I mean, frankly speaking, the people that are the infiltrators that we have, the people that are, actually doing what the AMNAT crowd always said, they're infiltrating the GOP, or they're infiltrating, K Street, or, what have you. They're in the military. Those people serve the movement best by just keeping their heads down, learning, and if possible, giving us intelligence or giving us financial support, but, not risking their position. I think that, telling people, oh, you're in this position, it'd be better if you dox yourself. Not really. You're going to really hamper your ability to support the thing. And we need people in those positions. We need people with those kind of skills that you can only learn from, very specialized, very high level positions. But in terms of like getting people organized, I mean, I my view on this is kind of the fourth generational warfare. You look at like violent non-state actors, and I don't say that in the sense that we should be violent, because frankly, I think that violence is the most counterproductive thing we can engage in. And
Mm-hmm.
that's not me cucking. That's just me saying, when you turn the population away from you by acts of violence, you lose in this day and age. They won't support you, and we need that kind of support to be able to do anything serious. But
You can't do good if you're in jail.
yeah, you can't do good if you're in jail, and you can't do good if everybody thinks that you're a murderer.
Yeah.
It doesn't work that way. I'm sorry. But like getting people together, and kind of a cell structure, right? ISIS has had a lot of success in their attacks overseas, because they've just kind of radicalized individuals or radicalized small cells. But it's not just in a vacuum, right? They send people over there. The Bataclan massacre, they had operators from Syria who were in communication with high command, that were speaking with like locally organized cells that gave them the equipment and stuff to do that. Now, obviously, that is, we would never, I personally find that kind of action, of course, abhorrent. Somebody that is pretty close to me almost died in those attacks. It was pretty scary, but that is how groups operate when they're under the pressure of Zog, right? When you're fighting, the military, industrial, intelligence, corporate apparatus to defend Israel and our Zionist government here in America. That you have to think very small. You have to worry a lot about OPSEC, small groups, right? Because all the OPSEC in the world, it talks about, oh, is Threema safe? Is Signal safe? Is Rocket Chat? All that kind of stuff. That goes out the window if you can't trust the people that you work with. Real OPSEC is based around vetting people, getting to know people, getting to trust people, and building reputational networks, so that somebody could go somewhere else and say, I don't know this guy, but somebody that we both trust for vouches for everybody. And it works a lot better than just saying, oh, well, you were on this website, you seem cool. And I think that's kind of the model that we need to go to, is organizing people and smaller cells with purposes, right? And say, people get together, and then have the ability for them to reach out to kind of more of the strategic leadership and say, like, here's a good example. We need a project to help people dealing with opiate recovery.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of people that are dealing with overcoming, issues with serious addiction. And I think the worst thing we could do in the world would just be to say, you're degenerates, fuck off. We don't want you. Because often very well-meaning people, and they're going through a very understandable struggle. We need people that can kind of help form that support network, where it doesn't even necessarily need to be political, but people from our side of things where guys feel comfortable talking about their own struggles, and to build those relationships. So instead of killing themselves or doing awful things to others, they find a way to better themselves and to work with people and to actually build something. So I would say that's kind of the direction that we need to go, is that kind of a thousand seeds to be planted, right? And some of them aren't going to work out. Some of them are going to fall on bad soil and not work. Some of them are going to get infiltrated or caught or whatever. But the vast majority of them will organize. Will get, and I think that there has been a lot of success. I don't think that the pool parties are necessarily under like direct command of TRS leadership, and I don't know about the Stormer stuff, but I would assume that the local level has a great deal of autonomy, and many of them kind of go in their own direction. And that's what we need to encourage more of, is people just forming relationships with people, forming networks. And it doesn't even necessarily need to be in meet space. I think that it's a bit safer to do it online, but just to focus on building long-term relationships with people. And eventually, we're almost already at that point, really, where we've got such a large network of people. But we've got to be able to go and say, okay, well, hey, we need legal assets, or we need medical assets, or whatever, and that there would be a way to reach out and kind of direct those resources, if that makes sense.
Definitely, yeah. And I think, I guess, the the call to action I would give is, if you're not plugged into the community, if you don't talk to any of us on any sort of regular basis, like, make a Twitter account, get on one of these social media websites, and just kind of start talking with people. Um, Start talking with us, because that's as much as people kind of can. I think there are valid criticisms to say to, like, it being extremely online, but that's the first place where we can really start building rapport with each other. Um, and now, of course, there's a certain amount of risk being taken, even just getting on a social media site and engaging with us. But I mean, a lot of our guys on our side have done a lot of work, like, regarding OPSEC and stuff like that. So we've got some really knowledgeable guys on our side, about OPSEC, who would be more than happy to help you, and can definitely point you the right direction in terms of learning more about securing yourself in that way. But just get on and start talking with people, and start building that rapport, building those connections, not necessarily with the expressed intent of meeting up face to face, but just kind of with that in the back of your head of, like, maybe I could meet up with these people,
People,
eventually.
yeah, that you would feel comfortable. The other thing I would say that I do see this as a problem among IRL groups is, don't let it become a drinking club. I think that
Yes.
that's been a huge problem we've run into is, it's good to have friends and it's good to be able to let loose sometimes, but I think people do kind of use it as an outlet for, engaging in perhaps, somewhat degenerate behavior. And, it's all good and fun. Certainly I've done that in my time, but, that's not what we're about. That's a social thing that kind of needs to be outside of the purpose of it. If you want a social activity that's not that, there's plenty of stuff to do. Nature stuff. Go work out together. Go build something. Go figure out a small charity thing you can do. That kind of stuff is a lot more effective, than just socializing and talking about how much you hate certain groups of people over a beer.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, that's the point of building these groups, is kind of, not just building up trust with each other, but, like, building up trust on the level of, like, a group of men working together. Um, like, the guys that I've done activism with, I have a stronger bond with them than some people that I've known for years and years longer, just because, like, we've put ourselves on the line like that together. So I mean, even though some kind of activism, like postering and stuff like that, might seem really dumb, or like, it might not have that much of an effect, I think that it's the practice that you get doing that is often underestimated. Like, just learning to work together in kind of like a covert environment and stuff like that, it it really builds up confidence in your group.
Yeah, I mean, those are literally called confidence goals, and it's an important thing to have that now, as long as the goal is not, to just poster or just to do
Oh,
that.
of course.
But yeah, I mean, confidence goals are a good way to build cohesion. We're talking about a huge project, right? We're basically looking at trying to rebuild the entire political system, trying to come in and take the damn thing over. It's doable, but it's a very big thing that needs to happen. And so yeah, we need to have smaller things that people can succeed and feel like they're having success and enjoy a little bit of that before we get into it. Because we do kind of got to look at it from a military point of view, right? One of the biggest things I'm sure Jason Kessler would say, is, oh, well, look at all the people whose lives have been hampered. I think Andrew Anglin had said this too. People whose lives have been damaged because they associated with the alt right. People have suffered because of this kind of stuff. And all I can think about, and they give me shit for saying this, but look at a military unit. Casualties are part of battle. Whenever you interact with the enemy, they're shooting back. That's how these things really go. We will take, and it's unfortunate and it's terrible. But I think people, as long as they go into the thing eyes wide open, knowing that yes, this is something that you could potentially suffer for, and go in accepting that and knowing that we're going to take casualties, and the solution to that is not to find a way where we don't take any casualties anymore, but to make the losses that we take worth it, and also to replenish the ranks, right? Despite all of the American Marines that have been killed in the history of us fighting wars, young guys are always lining up to go be a Marine because it's really cool, it's badass. And I think that's kind of the attitude we need to take with our stuff, is that people should want to join us because it's fucking cool, and it's neat to be part of something that's bigger than yourself, to be fighting for something that has meaning, as opposed to just the nihilism of hiding.
Absolutely. Yeah. People are drawn to confidence. They're drawn to people who they perceive as being sincere. And in this movement, I've met some of the most sincere people I've met in my life. And I mean, yeah, it would be irresponsible not to acknowledge that there are risks with becoming involved with us. And I think that it could be stated that for a lot of us, that's kind of a responsibility we have. Like, I mean, for our nation, for our people. I mean, parents have to make sacrifices for their children sometimes, but those risks can be mitigated, and just having people in meat space to work with and to help you out in those situations, that is going to have a huge difference in terms of any potential fallout. Because I mean, just you never know what kind of people that you're going to have in those crowds. Like, I know that there was they had someone on the Foundry recently, I believe, who was doing metalworking, and he taught a bunch, I think it was welding, and he taught some of the guys in their local group how to weld. And now some of their guys in that group have careers welding. Welders can make insane amounts of money, and they're so skilled that it's really difficult for them to get fired if they get doxxed. So I mean, yeah, you could have tradespeople who can teach you stuff like that. You could have someone who owns a business who can hire you. Um, yeah, like underwater welding is basically set your own price. Yeah, that's one of the most dangerous jobs in the world, I think.
I was about to say that's like second only to like the guys that got to get dropped in by a helicopter to repair power lines in the middle of nowhere.
And bomb squad people, yeah.
Yeah, no thing. I don't know. Like, I if I'm gonna die, I don't want to die getting crushed because like my scuba suit failed because I accidentally cut through it when I was welding underwater, getting crushed by like a collapsing. I don't know. I don't like the ocean. I've read too much H.P. Lovecraft to be a big fan of like large bodies of deep water I can't see the bottom of.
Burning and drowning to death simultaneously sounds absolutely horrific.
Oh,
It's
they're
like
pretty
the
bad.
worst two deaths combined.
I mean, if you like, if it was quick enough that like it was just kind of you didn't feel it so much, that would be kind of a bad. They'd be at the funeral and be like, "How'd he go out?" Oh, he was burning and drowning at the same time. Fucking sweet, dude.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
like yeah, it's one of the more hard. But that's the thing, right? Is it used to be, our ancestors had the spirit of like a noble death, fucking Valhalla, right?
Mm-hmm.
The idea that that's where you aspired to go, is the place that you had to struggle and eventually, die violently to get to. And now people get mad if I mean, name an inconvenience, right? Getting banned off Twitter is like the end of the world for some people. It's a whole different ball game, right? We've really lost the courage. And it's, yes, I get that it's a different era. I get that things are wildly different, but that I think speaks more to the fact that we need to change internally than we need to conform to societal norms.
Yeah, and I wouldn't even say that is that we're saying this in like a push to encourage people to put themselves to like actually dox themselves and deal with the consequences of that. It's more just kind of preparing for that for yourself if it ever happens. Um, I mean, I don't see mainstream politics improving for us. I think that things have been getting worse and they're going to continue to get a lot worse before they get better, and I think that we're all going to need a to rely on each other um a lot more than we do now. Like, I don't know, like it just I would hate to just hear about anyone suffering and getting doxxed and stuff like that and not having anyone to rely on. Like, I've just heard lots of stories like that. Um, and I just and sometimes they've gone really far south to the point of hurting other people in the movement, and it's just like, how could we have gone about that differently to avoid the situation in the first place? Um, and I think the answer to that is really just more face-to-face engagement. Um, Eventually, like, I want this to be a continued topic on the show of like how to actually take that step from just sitting listening to podcasts to building a group of like-minded men in your area who can all work together. And there's a lot of things to cover in regards to that. Like, I mean, we could probably talk for 10 hours about different aspects of security alone. So yeah, we'll go over a lot of this stuff as time goes on. But I kind of just wanted to give like a brief introduction to the general idea that I want to kind of push with this of building communities across the nation. And I mean, I realize Matthew Parrott's doing something really similar, and I think that I support that wholeheartedly. I think that our intentions are in line with each other there. I've really been enjoying the Foundry. Um, but yeah, Joaquin, what do you think about that as an
Yeah,
overview?
I think that, I mean, look, I think that it's important. And this is one of the reasons I really am excited for your show, is because, you've got a very unique perspective with all of this. And, when we first talked about setting it up and you said, look, I want to spend a lot of time talking about serious strategies regarding advocacy and talk about that. I think it's really the third rail within internal movement politics is how do we seriously do stuff? And we need more people that are willing to talk about it, not just privately, but publicly, and to put forward new strategies and to criticize failed strategies. I think it's really important. So I'm glad that you're here, and I'm really excited to walk this path forward with you.
Oh, thank you. I'm really glad to be here. I think this is going to be really cool. And I just kind of wanted to touch on what you said there, is that the quote unquote Wignat strategy isn't easily summed up in something like infiltrate the GOP or something like that. So like I know like a lot of our conversations online end up going back to like, well, what do you propose? And it's like, well, I think we should be doing like 30 different things on 30 different fronts, but I think it's really it's really doable, but it's not as easily summed up uh, like that. And I mean, I can see the appeal of something that's succinct, and maybe we can come up with some tagline to sum up our strategy like that. But I think that this platform of like a uh, longer form ongoing conversation is really the best way to discuss that.
Yeah, it's certainly good. And look, when the website eventually launches, which hopefully will be very soon, believe me, everybody keeps telling me it's about to go, it's about to go. So hopefully really soon. But yeah, being able to have that archive, hopefully being able to set a place for people to communicate and to kind of work from like we've had before, and like other people are trying as well. All of that really matters. George Washington was a successful general, not just because of his battle strategy. In fact, he lost most of the battles he ever fought in, but because he was an incredible master of handling intelligence. He was, the first and probably the most successful American spy master. During his presidency, like 20% of the federal budget was going to his intelligence operations. Right, we would have been wiped out at Valley Forge had he not deceived the British into thinking that we had significantly more soldiers there than we did. Intelligence and kind of operating as an intelligence network, or people involved in that field, it's dangerous, it's dirty business, but it does work. And I think that that's kind of a strategy that requires us to have many efforts going on, many of which will fail. Right, not every agent you attempt to recruit, not everything you try to do will succeed. Many of them will fail, but you got to keep trying. You can't let failure stop you from trying again, because you never know if this will be the one that works.
Yeah, I mean, and we know we've got those intelligence style uh, operations working against us right now. I mean, some of them are possibly even listening to the show, and we do
I think I just
filter.
gassed a couple of them, to be honest.
We do filter our words through that understanding. Is I'm I'm definitely speaking to the audience here, but I mean, I definitely have in mind how that's going to be playing to the hostile people listening as well. So we might as well be fighting fire with fire. Um, it would be dumb to not, based on some win taking the high road attitude.
Right. And look, there's values to, to moral stuff, but you've
Oh
got to look
yeah.
at it like a cynic, right? Like if we advocate nonviolence, it's not because like I think that people who, look, violence is a tool just like anything else. Just like
Hmm.
doxing is a tool, just like, a rifle is a tool.
Hmm.
But, like let's say hypothetically we had a strategy if we just recruited a bunch of, clean cut Zoomers like the Covington kids and said, all right, you're going to walk into a mob of Antifa and get your fucking faces bashed in. We're going to record it and put it on TV. Very cynical thing to do. It might work. I don't know. It might work. It might not. But that would be the kind of nonviolence that we would look at. We need to be cynical about everything, because
Absolutely, and that's one reason why like the American Legal Defense Fund is such I hope I got that right. The American Legal Defense Fund is such an important thing, because we can fund efforts like that, or at least have people can take steps like that with the assurance that they are going to be taken care of. And I mean, we aren't at that spot yet, I don't think, to be able to do that. But I think that is definitely something to be working towards.
yeah, at least the idea. The anarchists have the anarchist Black Cross. They've got all these, legal defense funds. They'll go to, Antifa will be there. Black Lives Matter will be there. These people with weapons and with shields and every intent of causing violence. And you'll see these guys in these neon green hats next to them, just waiting for somebody to get arrested because they want to go legally represent them and defend them.
Yep.
And they're able to do a lot of that stuff because they know that they have, people supporting them. A support network is incredibly important. The American military, for all of its flaws, is as strong as it is because of its ability to use logistics. And we've got to learn those lessons. We've got to, I can't remember who said it, but somebody once said a good general thinks about strategy, a great general thinks about logistics.
Yeah, I mean
Kind of, go ahead.
that's part of why, like, because you were referencing like people want to join the Marines earlier. Like people want to join the Marines because it's badass and all that, but they also know there is that support there if they end up getting shot. There's going to be a medic. There's logistics and plans in place for if the worst case scenario ever does occur. So I think that we can kind of provide a parallel to that and work towards that.
Yeah, and look at how American society supports veterans, right? That's one of the reasons why so many people want to join the military, because they know that there is kind of this broad support, respect for it. And we need that as well. And it's not going to be everybody. It's probably going to be a very small percentage of people involved in this stuff that do actively get involved with the IRL aspect of it. But in order to have the tip of the spear, you need the shaft. Which, wow, that was a little bit a little bit implicit, but I think you get the point.
But also, I think that's like encouraging respect for our political prisoners and people who have gotten doxxed will go a long way in that regard. Because I mean, that's kind of getting towards that. Like, I don't want to outright like people on our side don't necessarily have like the same experience and status as someone who went and spent time in Afghanistan
No,
or
of
something
course
like
not.
that.
Of course
Clearly,
not.
but
Yeah, but it's the
but
same
some
principle.
sort of respect for experience or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of lessons, not just from the military, but from, business, right? We've got people that are actually seriously involved and successful with, high finance and how businesses are run. We need to take those lessons too. We need to learn how to operate a corporate structure, how to franchise out, how to resolve conflicts internally, how to manage PR and not be optics cucks. All that kind of stuff. And it's like we've got this talent, we've got these people. It's just a matter of finding a way forward that everybody can kind of get on board behind, and finding a mechanism to really deal with the issues that pop up inevitably, not just praying that nothing bad ever happens, because of course bad things happen.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, the technology is all already out there for us to coordinate something like that. It's just a matter of finding of what what do we build it around that people are going to want to engage with.
Right, and that's the other thing too, right? You got to go with strong horse theory and say, I believe it was a Saudi architect once said, people see a weak horse and a strong horse, and by nature they prefer the strong horse. We've got to
Mm-hmm.
quit playing the victim. Frankly speaking, we've got to, because we can't. The left prioritizes and praises victim status. We're never going to win that victim hierarchy. So playing that game just doesn't work, right? When we try to play the Charlie Kirk side of things, of saying, oh well, look at these guys are actual racists. Oh, they're anti-Semites. This double standard. Oh, we're being censorship, right? The Laura Loomer thing of, oh, I'm being kicked off Twitter. It's another Showa. That kind of crap. It doesn't fly. Using identity politics like that doesn't work. You see a lot of people. I could name names all day. Vox Day and Laura Loomer are the two that come to mind.
Mm-hmm.
That say because either I'm an Amerindian mix or a Jew, I should have special privilege status. I can't be called a white supremacist. I can't be called a racist because I belong to this minority group. It's never going to work in our favor. And
Yep.
playing that game is just asking to lose.
You see more and more Asians getting called white supremacists lately. Like that's becoming a common thing.
Well, Asians are smart. I don't know what to say about that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess like it's just in terms of their victim hierarchy. If Asians can't escape it, there's no way that any of us can by just saying the right things. Because I mean, even like I've seen several. I wish I had a source to pull up off the top of my head, but like the times I've seen some people of Asian descent get in trouble for this sort of thing, they were just they weren't trying to be political or anything like that. They just did something by chance that like any normal white person would do and then get in trouble for. Um, so I mean, yeah, it doesn't even take intention. They don't care about the intention at all. They just care about it pushing their. I mean, it's really like a power play ultimately. I mean, they clearly don't actually care that much because remember when those there were those Marines that got beat up by the Antifa over on I want to say it was like DC or New York, and then one of the guys yelled as he was getting beaten up, "I'm Mexican, I'm Mexican." And then they start I don't know what I can say on here. It's like they start calling him like a bunch of racial slurs regarding Mexican people. So I mean, they at a primal level they don't care. They just care about pushing about taking their wins where they can.
Yeah, and that's kind of what we've got to emulate too.
Yeah,
So a
absolutely.
lot of good stuff. I'm really glad. I know we said we're probably aiming for 90 minutes. We were already at 100 minutes. Look at that,
Oh yeah.
running over. But I think this has been pretty good. Unless you got anything else you want to cover right now, let's maybe put a pin in it, and we'll come back to it Wednesday, or at least you'll come back. I'm not sure if I'll be there. or not.
Absolutely. Sounds good.
Alrighty, sounds good.
To wrap up.
Alrighty. Well, thank you everybody so much for coming out today. Thank you for the support, for the donations, for the kind words. I've seen a lot of support. Yeah, this is an incredible thing. The project keeps moving forward, and I look forward to walking this path with all of you, but especially to SoCo, who can we all agree that SoCo did a hell of a job today? I think we all can agree that.
Thank you.
Did a hell of a job, buddy. And
I appreciate it.
Alex Jones, as always, killing it in the background. I love this OBS setup. It's a little bit more complicated, but he's certainly.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jones. I want to give a shout out to the Wignat gang. Just right before we wrap up. But anyway, yeah, thank you guys all for coming here today. I really appreciate all the donations and all the incredible support. It's really overwhelming. I know that when I got banned off of Twitter, seeing all the threads, I actually got a little bit choked up just seeing all the support and all that. But thankfully, there was a fan of mine made an account at SoCo fan account on Twitter, and he says a lot of the same things I would say, so go ahead and follow him. But anyway, yeah, thank you guys so much, and we will see you guys on Wednesday.
All righty, have a good one, everybody. Mr. Jones.
So I don't know what happens if a shark eats my ethno steak.
Widening giant. The falcon cannot hear the falconer. Things fall apart. The center cannot hold. Mere anarchy is loosed upon the world. The blood-dimmed tide is loosed. And everywhere the ceremony of innocence is drowned. The best lack all conviction, while the worst are full of passionate intensity. The second coming is at hand. The second coming. Hardly are those words out when a vast image out of spiritus suddenly troubles my sight. A waste of desert sand, a shape with lion body and the head of a man. A gaze blank and pitiless as the sun is moving its slow thighs. While all about it, real shadows of the indignant desert birds. Drops again, but now I know that 20 centuries of stony sleep were vexed to nightmare by a rocking cradle. And what rough beast! Its hour come round at last, slouches towards Bethlehem to be born.